you want to think of starter as an animal and you need to keep it alive, it actually, I guess, is kind of an animal, not a mammal, but so you need to keep it alive, which means you're going to need to feed it a certain amount of times, and we'll talk about that in a minute, to keep it alive. First we're gonna make the starter. So it's an active creature, and you can get it from somebody who already has some, and then use that instead of making your own starter. But here we're gonna make it in case that's what you want to do. So you want to put your jar on the scale and zero it out, and then add in 60 grams of that all-purpose, unbleached is key, flour. Bleached flour will kill the animal. So 60 grams of flour. Be pretty precise. It actually does matter to some degree. And now that I say that, I'm at 62 grams. Okay, 61 is close enough. And then you want to add an equal amount of water. So again, I'll tare it to 0 in case you can't add, and put in 60 grams of flour. Again, I put in too much, so I'm going to take some out because it really does matter, and I lost my spoon. So I'm going to take out some of this water. Try not to take out flour. We are at 68. So do it a little more precisely than I am. 60. Sorry guys, 64. 60. Okay. And once you have equal amounts, 60 grams of flour and 60 grams of water, give it a brisk, deep stir. You don't want any of the flour to be dry. And you're also incorporating air. Okay, so see, I just stirred it up. Okay, this is the start of the starter. And what you're going to need to do with this starter that you're creating, it's not yet starter, it's going to activate. So there's yeast in the air, and in Portland there's probably really good yeast in the air. What you want to do is just set it aside, covered, in a warm spot. So I usually, when I'm trying to make things grow, I usually stick them by my stove, because that over the course of a couple days is warm, but in a relatively warm spot, and just leave it alone. But so we're creating the starter. So in 12 hours I am going to go back and adjust the starter. So this is 12 hours later, say it won't look like anything in particular, but now we're going to adjust the starter again. So I'm going to start with a clean jar. This is 12 hours later. And I'm going to take out some of the starter I've already made. And I'm going to make that, let's do 25 grams of the starter I already had. So I'm going to take, this is 12 hours later, remember that's important, not immediately. 25 grams, that's 26, close enough again. I'm going to add in 60 more. Let's do 50 grams of flour. Sorry. 50. So close. 49. God, I hate grams. Okay, there's 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. Going slow, not to make it crazy over the top. This was 57, but I've got a bunch of water on the scale, so I'm just going to call that good. And again, stir it up briskly. Mix everything together. Okay, and you're going to set this aside in a warm spot for 12 hours. Eventually, you'll see some action in here. Again, it varies depending on your climate. Always cover it. You'll see some action, and action is when it begins to grow. So you want to do it every 12 hours for 4 adjustments, right? So you're going to need a lot of you could clean your jars. Every 12 hours, 4 times. And then you're going to start doing it every 24 hours. And so you do the same thing. Take out 25 grams, add in 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. Set it aside for 12 hours. Take out 25 grams of starter, add in 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. Always stirring vigorously, always leaving it for 12 hours in a warm spot, and you're going to do this 4 times. After those 4 times are up, you're going to start doing it every 24 hours. So same thing, take out 25 grams, put in 50 grams of water, 50 grams of flour, set it aside in a warm spot every 24 hours. And how many days you have to do that depends on how quickly it's growing. So you'll know it's growing. So here's the fresh stuff we just made. And I used to put a line in a marker so I knew where my starter was starting. But when it's growing, it's obvious. And this one's starting to go down, but look at the bubbles and how it sticks to the wall and has massive little bubbles. That's an active live animal. Active starter, it's called. See it? So once you have the active starter, now it's time to start feeding it. So what you were doing before was just creating the starter. Once your starter is active, like this, then you want to feed it to keep it alive. Now, feeding it to keep it alive is the similar process. And I don't have a clean jar, so I'm going to get one. Sorry. You'll need to have a good handful of jars just to keep them clean. So notice I'm using always the wide mouth jar. It's just easier. Okay, so with the starter feedings, which is different than creating the starter, with the starter feedings, here's what's going to happen. And this you do every 24 hours just to keep the beast alive. There are variations to this, like you can put it in the fridge, but I'm not going into the variations. You just want to make a loaf of sourdough at this point. Okay, so to feed the starter and knock over the camera, which you knew would happen, right? To feed the starter, remember this is what we're doing now, feeding it. It's alive, we're feeding it, keeping it alive. We're going to do 15 grams of the active starter. See how sticky it is? Look at how sticky, live creature it is. Look at that. So 15 grams is not much. 15 grams of starter, active starter. Okay. And now we're going to put in 60, the proportions are changing here, 60 grams of flour. Oops. And 60 grams of overnighted water. So there's no chemicals in it. And again, stir rigorously. This is now the creature that you got to keep alive by feeding it every 24 hours. Sit it in, it doesn't matter where it sits at this point. It doesn't have to be warm because it'll grow. Sit it wherever you want, but always feed it every day. Again, you're just wanting to create a loaf of bread, so this is what you're going to want to do. When you're on pause from making bread, there's other things you can do. Set it aside in a warm spot. Nope, sorry, it doesn't have to be warm. Set it aside in a spot and feed it every single day approximately the same time. You'll see that right before you're feeding it, it's going to be grown up and the sticky, airy thing. Okay, so we created the starter from scratch until it got active with all the bubbles in it. And then once it's alive with all the bubbles in it, you have to feed it every day. Okay, so the 2 processes in this video. Thanks for watching.